What really struck me is how they've developed this entire ecosystem. Right? As there are more millennials, as there are more Gen Z people joining this ecosystem is just growing bigger and bigger and bigger, just not in India. The real test of this AI era isn't when another tech company breaks a valuation record. It's when every company builds its own AI native capability and keeps its value instead of transferring it to tech giants.
I think every founder's deck today says about AI powered, AI native. But under the hood, most are just wrappers around maybe someone else's API. I mean, that's the crux of it, right? The real moat is in. Hi Ramesh, morning.
Hello, good morning, Shri. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How was your weekend? Looks like fresh, back again.
It's always a great Monday morning to be recording what we have, right? So it's always fresh. Weekend was great. Weekend had an interesting piece. My daughter was singing at a large. This is the first time I'm going to an ISKCON temple, and ISKCON is all about Krishna consciousness. They have this movement called Hare Krishna movement, and everything is just revolving around Krishna, and it is a massive movement, right? I last remember going to an ISKCON maybe when I was 7, and this is very close to my house, where my daughter was singing, participating in a evening of bhajan that was happening, and it just struck me that here is this movement, what they call it is International Krishna Consciousness, right? Something to do with that. That's what it is, a full form. But the ecosystem they've created around it, right? And my daughter's wasn't the only event that was happening. There was one before that, and there was a more mature singing session and a group that came together. What really struck me is how they've developed this entire ecosystem. Right? As there are more millennials, as there are more Gen Z people joining this ecosystem is just growing bigger and bigger and bigger, just not in India. Right? So I'm just amazed at this ecosystem play that some of these religious institutions are having. And talk about AI. There's no AI. There is what's their moat, right? If they have to look at it in a way, and each of them are by in itself pretty rich ecosystems that they've created.
But you talk about ecosystem, Ramesh. For me, ISKCON takes me back in time, because I got to know about ISKCON only when I was in the US, in the Bay Area. Right?
Oh, there you go.
That's where I ISKCON is where we we're a bunch of bachelors living in the Bay Area, right? The moment you talk about ISKCON, reminds me of the good food I had.
Oh, talk about the good food. Amazing food,
right? Good food, I mean, that's where our, we wake up in the morning and we feel like we want to have home food. And it was Sunday.
You go to ISKCON. You see the ecosystem I created?
Right?
It's not just Krishna consciousness, it's how do the tummy consciousness as well.
That's how they also kind of get people who want to be there regular. We ended up going, in fact, I ended up going there at least twice or thrice a month, right? And you start volunteering, you want to give it back. You can't just have free food all the time. But talk about ecosystem.
Exactly.
I think nothing like an ISKCON ecosystem. They know what is required. They give good food.
If food is just one part of it, that's definitely not their mode. But they're talking about ecosystems and creating that. And let's just bring it back to what it is at Outbound by Highperformr for this part. I think it's also relevant that I was reading Satya's post early this morning, and he said something that I could correlate this whole ecosystem play with. And he says, the real test of this AI era isn't when another tech company breaks a valuation record. And you know what he's talking about. It's when every company builds its own AI native capability and keeps its value instead of transferring it to tech giants. A lot of underlying messages. And if for those who are closely looking at this valuation and that's going on, this is a very, very loaded statement, right? And that's exactly the tension I think most startups are feeling right now, right? If I just take a step back and look at from a startup ecosystem, are we really building on AI? or are we just building for the platforms? What do you think? How is the whole ecosystem bringing together about what Satya said? Very true, right?
But that's a big question, Ramesh. I'll give a context, right? I think every founder's deck today, says about AI powered, AI native, whatever you want to call it, right? But under the hood, most are just wrappers around maybe someone else's API. I mean, that's the crux of it, right? Whether you like it or not like it, that's the crux of it, right? The real moat is in the model anymore, right? But you also have to kind of realize that everybody who wants to start, everybody who has a company, been there new in the last 3 months or 3 years or last 10 years, the real moat is in the model you're using, right? It's ecosystem you create around it. I mean, that's the way I look at it, and that's what my takeaway was.
It's not the platform per se, right? Or
it's a commodity, right? I mean, I'll
Are you saying that the platform is more of an illusion today than the ecosystem?
I'll give an example, Ramesh. You just take a step back and go like early days of SaaS, right? When everybody, we started building it on, the AWS, right? Thought the infrastructure underneath is the innovation of SaaS. Meaning, but whether you use AWS or then you start using, the Azure or the GCP, that isn't the moat, right? The distribution was really the moat, right? I think today's it's the same story, right? You could just swap AWS or GCP with LLMs, right?
Very true. Actually, it's as hard hitting as it is today, right?
Correct.
This whole illusion of AI native, right? Everyone is
correct.
People think of it as very defensible, right? It's a moat, and you can.
Correct.
But I don't think it is defensible anymore, right? It doesn't. When every time OpenAI or Anthropic releases a new API, you're just instantly re-releasing your core feature again, right? You are replicating that. It's not necessarily building a demo, and I think that's where founders, and a lot of times us included in this, we go wrong, right? We think that access to model is differentiation.
Correct.
But that's not anymore, because today it's just not, there are just not Anthropic, OpenAI and Gemini as models. There are so many models that are getting like there is Kimi and there is there's so many that we talk about. I think, but that's just the baseline anymore. There's no differentiation. So every company has access to these models now.
Correct.
And what's scarce, like what's not less in terms of limited availability, is just not the model. I think it is more about the context, the data, the workflow, the relationship that you build on it, and I think that is very, very important. That's the ecosystem play that we are kind of talking about.
I'll give you one more example, Ramesh. In fact, we should talk about the compounding ecosystem, right? That's the most important piece today in the pod.
What do you mean by compounding ecosystem?
Yeah, so even before that, I'll give an example of how we think everything is going to be disrupted, right? I think about a couple of weeks back, the Perplexity launched their own browser, Comet, right? I mean, they do make a splash. Of course, people are curious about learning about new things.
Yeah.
But it is no way closer to replacing an ecosystem created either by Chrome or even the Safari, right? There's an ecosystem play which if like Perplexity wants to win with the Comet, they'll have to build the ecosystem which is being built by the Chrome and the Safari. And that's the difference. I mean, I think sometimes we think, we are replacing the features, but that's not the real fact. It is not about, I think, building a new browser. The success of being able to build a successful, the ecosystem for browser depends upon how many users have made that actual browser as a default, right? People want to try.
But that also you need to bring a lot of other parts to that. It's just not the screen level, surface level browser anymore, right? In this case.
So I think here's what is, it really gets interesting is that in a very old SaaS world, your product defined your moat. Typically, Ramesh, you come from a strong SaaS. I think historically, a decade back, you look at features which basically were considered as a moat. If you're building a CRM, you want to say, I have a new way of doing lead scoring, right? I think today in a specific, the world where you have AI, I think everybody have the ability to build the features in weekend. If somebody decides to build what you built in they could just, if they really want to build it, they can build over the weekend and get an MVP out there, right? But the real moat is your ecosystem. Your ecosystem defines your moat today, right? And that's where a lot of companies are investing time and energy building that ecosystem. But that's the difference, right? For example,
I think you're giving a fantastic play. Like I think from where Satya Nadella and also speak about is talk about the Microsoft Exchange server.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
There is, or the Google work cloud per se. It's an ecosystem, and that's just not cloud for storage anymore. Right?
That's right.
There is
That's
so many apps. There are developers. There are, everyone is building on top of
Correct.
it. I think that is what the entire ecosystem kind of drives technology ahead, and the adoption of technology, more importantly.
Correct.
Right? And I hear when you say it's the compounding effect, when everyone, like we talk about customers, partners, and sometimes even competitors are building on your platform. A lot of them, it doesn't mean that if you're a competitor, you cannot use it. Use the competitor for your own advantage in building something on top of it, and that still works. You're coexisting in the ecosystem that we're playing.
Correct.
Right? I think that's when growth becomes exponential.
In fact, Ramesh, we also have to understand, like, take a step back and look at companies in even the past, right? Let's take an example of like HubSpot. Do you think HubSpot is only a CRM company? Right? Not necessarily, right? It's a platform of hundreds of, of integrations, right? Partners and data being flowed between, there are a lot of connectors which basically, push and pull data across the ecosystem, right? That is the reason HubSpot is, super excited. They bought an ecosystem which was only available for the enterprise, the customers. They bought it to SMB, and hence they basically made a successful win, right? That's the ecosystem play, right? It's not easy to understand. We think, there are hundreds of CRM which match the HubSpot features, but why aren't they able to win big like HubSpot?
Very true. HubSpot, talk about Salesforce. Right, there are beyond the product, it's their
ecosystem,
app engine,
the
developers, the implementation, the customer success. So I think that's the ecosystem play. That's the ecosystem play. But do you think in this AI age, when you're saying the product is not the moat anymore, or if you're alluding towards that, it's going to take time for this ecosystem to be built. Right? It's not that, all of these companies, talk about Microsoft Exchange Server, talk about AWS, talk about Google Cloud. If you're talking about them, HubSpot, Salesforce, they probably took 10 years, 15 years to kind of enter and be in that ecosystem play. But the new age AI companies / AI natives, are we saying it's too early to call anyone? And that's why we've got to wait. Any entrepreneur who's starting off right now in this AI native place is got to stay, figure it out, not be loud, build that before they can even say what we do. I think that's
correct. So, there are multiple pieces, right? I think, for example, let's take an example of OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between OpenAI and Anthropic, right? It's very, very hard. But like both of them have the models.
Yeah.
Like one might have slight edge over the other on the time on a particular given day, right? But the moat is basically the network of developers, the tools, the feedback loop that is built around these products. For example, maybe slightly ChatGPT today has a slight
the interface.
Meaning the feedback loop is better. Lot more developers are using, a lot more people are using, a lot more enterprises are trying to use.
Yeah.
That's about it, right? You look at the X AI. They just came in late, but they're as popular these days as these two guys, right? So there is no ecosystem play yet.
You're saying the winner takes it all at that point in time. It's
meaning
not like
they just have attention, they grab the attention. But there is the irony, right? In if you look at this year, right? Between maybe this year and next year, every startup would say I'm AI native, AI first. Have you heard about any startup, any company, even the incumbents? They wanted to replay the whole story and they want to say we are AI first, right? But the real winners is the one who have ecosystem play. Are you making the end user successful, right? Which company basically helps you? It has to be OpenAI, like API based, ecosystem based. Data should be kind of flowing in easily and
democratic.
Correct. So the one building for the next layer of network or ecosystem is the one which will win, right? Meaning that's the whole idea, right?
So let's take this lens back to a founder's lens again, right? And we've been talking about Sri and I often. This is our lunchtime discussion. So very often, right? If you are a early stage it's always hitting us on what's the mode, what do you
what's the startup playbook?
Yeah, playbook, right? So
correct.
If we say that you have to build an ecosystem, it's too hard to believe this, Sri, right? It's too hard to even think about an ecosystem when you're a startup. But when you break that ecosystem, building an ecosystem kind of a problem into chunks, what does it mean?
So I think Ramesh, if you just take a step back and look at it, first I think we should own your data feedback loop. You know what I mean is that it is beyond the interface, right? We should not be the one who's consuming the context all the time. We should be able to generate one for the customers. Do you generate enough context for them? For example, I think in Highperformr, our objective is not sending emails. Our objective is to give them enough context to send super personalized email.
I like that. Yeah.
So what it means is that I would want it to be a startup which owns the data and the feedback loop for ourselves. The more proprietary behaviors, interactions, outcome, kind of driven use cases, right? That would make sense, I would say. I think at least will be relevant for us. You'll see smarter models all the time, but how are you adapting the smarter models to make the workflow better?
Okay.
That is the most important. I mean, that's the way I would look at it. Second, we should be able to create, I would say, micro ecosystems, right? Even if you're small, give users a way to extend your product through API, give another example. I'll go back and start
Isn't
using.
that part of what companies anyways used to do before?
No,
like giving out APIs.
No, giving out API. But for example, today, I think take example of the new age products. How many people are even aware that they are using a product of this particular type? For example, today customers don't. I still think that I'm using the HubSpot CRM, but HubSpot CRM is actually powered by a particular model.
Yeah.
Which is a third party. So that is the one which is scaling.
Do you also mean that if you're giving out APIs,
correct,
it could be to your competitor as well? Is
Doesn't
that
matter.
Opening up the?
For a minute, forget the competitors, right? Because the core API doesn't come from your competitors. You anyway end up using, like model APIs, right? So they are the one who's doing it. But the context is where is going to win. So are you building the context yourself, or you are taking it from somebody else? Are you letting people to push your context to a third-party system?
Got it.
I'll give an example, right? In Highperformr, your objective is to build the signal. The signal can be used for sending email, for making calls, for writing a next slide deck for the customer. Doesn't matter where it goes. But end of the day, you want it to be reminded as a product which basically generates a signal appropriate for the next conversation.
Correct.
Right? So which means that our play is ecosystem play. You will be successful, Ramesh, only when you find enough customers use the signals across the customer touch points. Right? So when you build the product itself, you have to build it such a way that you have connectors, you can push data, receive data, and don't be kind of fussy about it.
And here now what is meant by micro ecosystems? Essentially, do these small pieces inside extending beyond the product,
correct,
and make it available. So does it mean ecosystem also extends to the way of saying create your own distribution channel and solve for the last mile of connectivity, or is that still not the moat?
I would basically look at this way, Ramesh. You take a step back and look at it. If you're selling into an enterprise which is already having a Salesforce or a CRM, your objective should not be replace the CRM. Your objective is to find a workflow which is broken in the existing tools of theirs.
Yeah, we spoke about that last
That's
time.
exactly the same way. That's the only way you can build it. So that's a microsystem which you're building, which will evolve, which will make their existing workflow better. Right?
Interesting. And would you add the community into this? Like if there's a third piece of it, of just owning the feedback loop and creating microsystems, would you add a community to it and build the expertise around? Because a lot of times this is certainly underrated.
Correct.
We see a lot of great companies, including one of our largest competitor here. Also, the scale didn't happen just because they had a product, or just didn't happen because they were able to enrich data. There was an ecosystem play around it in terms of when operators shared their playbooks and said, we are doing that through a customer success teams. Because I think at Highperformr, one area, and this is a community of learning, why customers come to us is also because we are able to tell them how other customers are using Highperformr, right? And that's a very critical platform play, because you already have one use case in mind, and when someone unlocks, think of it as a community-driven exercise. Hey, you can also do this, and I think that becomes really powerful.
I mean, in fact, right?
That network is again same product experience, solving for your problem that you're looking for, but extending it to a different zone, and you didn't think of it that way.
Correct. In fact, Ramesh, you kind of bring the point there, right? So the opportunity is not always not replacing an existing software, right? That's so when you basically kind of look at it, it's about replacing the workflow which is not done right, or it is done a hard way. So what it means is that we don't say by winning that, hey, we are doing it better than X, right? What we, like the way we win today in the market today, the new way of SaaS winning is that we're just only saying them stop doing it in the, the hard way. Right?
Okay.
So that's the way we look at it. And that comes in with ecosystem where you kind of show them the best practices, show them the playbook of how things are done differently with AI. Because everybody are exploring AI. The one good thing is that everybody would wanted to kind of deploy AI in any use case they're already existing, be it customer support or be it sales or the customer success. Everybody wanted to get into the way of using AI and see how it could help. So that is a mindset change. In a way, that's the definition of the new SaaS play. It is not about building your next CRM or building your next analytics tool or building your next customer success tool, right? It's about building a system that would learn your existing workflow and make it better.
I think, Sri is again going back to what we've been always talking about is it's not about how do you compete with incumbents, right? It's about, hey, how can we fix something that's broken? It could be, in your existing play, but we're not here to replace that. And once we nail that, we can go. So, and when that happens, I think companies or startups don't have to think about, how do I replace my competitor or how do I gain market share? We just start creating new, better market logic, right? And therefore, these companies will not replace incumbents. They just kind of redefine what the job should look like in the first place.
So that is, in a way, that is the new playbook, Ramesh. Solve the workflow and not the feature gap. Because the moment you go into that rabbit hole of trying to find a feature gap, you will find that a model company like OpenAI or Anthropic is also filling that feature gap, right? That is actually relevant after a point. You should only worry about, hey, because, is the existing workflow done better or not? If that is the case, the customer will come and happily do it. So they are basically, we're trying to find a better way of working for the customers. That's the new moat, right? So let's define what is your definition of moat, Ramesh?
Go ahead.
Right? I think it's a very it keeps evolving. I mean, I don't think we kind of nailed it to that level, but there are certain things which are coming out very well where AI will automate most of what we talk about as work or task. I mean, that is apparent. Be it research or outreach or even I think the entire part of reporting, analytics. I don't know if we even look at analytics anymore, but it's all about AI inferred. All becomes the background task. So the value is all about how you deal with it upstream, to whom you are communicating it, what is the workflow, how are you making the outcome better. I mean, that is where I think I would put it right now. Is your software really helping me to get a better workflow done for businesses?
I think that's the new moat, that's the new moat. It's not about your infra stack. It's not about, looking what kind of data that we hold anymore. It's not about, just data enrichment in some cases as we hold, but it's the compounding loop, constant loop of between working with your users, your customers, your data, your extended partners, your customers, and bringing them all together and continuously finding use cases. I think that's the ecosystem that we're talking about, right?
But it also flips the mind, Ramesh. So as founders, we used to ask how can the AI or we always ask the question can the AI help us do something, right? Or what can AI do for us? I think we should switch from that question and start asking what can we build that others will build on with AI. So which means that every SaaS company should think about building an ecosystem.
Yeah. So
right for themselves.
When you do that, I like the way you said it, because when you do that, when you're flipping that to go, what can AI do for us that others can also build on? You are going beyond the purview of what you think your product originally starts doing for, right? You start thinking about, oh wow, I can do a little more. I can solve a problem that someone else isn't solving. I think that is the thought of getting it done through your product, and then bringing the entire ecosystem is probably what the new moat is.